The Capital Blue Cross Forum is sponsored in part by Capital Blue Cross.
Good morning. I'm Doug Furness, and welcome to this episode of the Public Affairs Forum sponsored by Capital Blue Cross. Capital Blue Cross is a regional Blue Cross plan serving approximately 800,000 members in central Pennsylvania and the Lehigh Valley. I want to thank our longtime partner in these broadcasts, PCN, for their commitment to the program and the relationship they have with Capital Blue Cross. We look forward to continuing that relationship for many years to come. Our format today will be familiar to most of you. Our guest will make a brief presentation, followed by a question and answer session moderated by me. If a member of our live audience wants to ask a question of our guest, please use the chat feature, and I will ask it of our guest. The whole program should last about an hour. Our guest today is Ori Monson, who currently serves as Budget Secretary for Governor Josh Shapiro. Mr. Monson was appointed by Governor Shapiro to serve as the Secretary of the Budget in January of 2023. Grew up in Philadelphia and has served in a variety of public service roles for nearly 30 years. Previously, Mr. Monson served as Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Chief Financial Officer for the School District of Philadelphia. During this time, the School District of Philadelphia improved its financial outlook to allow for a return to local city control and achieve an investment level credit rating for the first time since 1977. Mr. Monson has also served as the Chief Financial Officer of Montgomery County, Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Intergovernmental Cooperation Authority, and as Assistant Budget Director for the City of Philadelphia. Please welcome Secretary Monson to the show. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Doing okay. Well, I'll turn this over to you, and we'll get back together here shortly. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna hopefully do the share screen work. Hopefully this works right, and we'll be good to go. Okay. So just want to talk a little bit about the governor's proposed budget. This is what was proposed a couple months ago, and obviously is the main topic of discussion going on in Harrisburg these days. So a lot of what the budget was designed to do was to build on a lot of the accomplishments of the first year. I'm sure many of you have heard Governor Shapiro talk about the goal of getting stuff done, and I'll use that version of his GSD comment. But really the goal of advancing initiatives that benefit all Pennsylvanians. So, in the first year, able to expand the property tax rent rebate program, universal free breakfast for all K-12 students, largest ever increase in basic education funding, a real focus on mental health resources for students, particularly following the pandemic, investing in VOTEC apprenticeship programs, and creating the first ever state funding for indigent defense. At the time, we were one of only 2 states that didn't do that, and not on a list we wish to be on. The budget that we have, and I'll talk about a few details, heavy focus on pre-K through 12 public education, remaking the focus on higher education in the Commonwealth, real focus on economic competitiveness, the importance of housing, agriculture, which is one of our largest industries, supporting the most vulnerable in our society, combating gun violence, as well as sustainable environment. So I'm a numbers guy, so I got to do at least a couple slides of numbers. I'll apologize for anybody. But the basic general fund financial statement, the key point of this is Pennsylvania is in an historically good financial position. Our total available reserves at the end of last year, 14.1 billion. We're projecting to end this year. We were projecting in a financial statement to end at 14.2 billion. And even if all of the things that we propose in the budget were to be approved, we would still project ending a year from now with almost $11.4 billion. And this is on a $48 billion proposed budget. So that was kind of where we were as a snapshot. Our revenues are actually coming in stronger than we had anticipated. So if you look at the first column, the estimates through April were that we would have collected about $37.7 billion in revenues. We're actually at 38.4, so $740 million better than expected. So all that kind of layers on top of our projections as well. But we continue to see pretty healthy across most areas. Corporate taxes, even with the continuation of the tax cuts, have continued to perform well. We're actually starting to see now more income tax growth as jobs, unemployment rates remain low, wages have been increasing, et cetera. So our fiscal position remains strong. We did do a spring update we do every year just to sort of realign what we're seeing. We actually are projecting to spend now less than we originally thought. So our original projection, we're now projecting to spend about $81 million. The bulk of that is the $69.7 million in human services, and that's really because of usage. We do projections on folks accessing services, and as we're seeing, they're not. That's where the costs change. The second column is revised projections for next year related to what we had proposed, and you can see human services, we kind of carry that through and what that impact is. We are looking at increases in education, but overall we're expecting to spend less than we had originally projected back in February. All right, that's the end of the pure number screens, I promise. So in the budget, education is one of the key areas. I think everyone in the Commonwealth is aware of the Commonwealth Court case. I have the unusual position of having been the school district of Philadelphia CFO at the time the case, was a witness in the case, and then took this job, and the court made this decision, and have now had been on the other side of it. We are proposing almost a $1.1 billion increase in basic education funding, and probably the most important piece of that is creating an adequacy piece. What the court found is that we were not meeting the constitutional requirements around adequacy. So a heavier investment in the 400 districts across the Commonwealth that are considered inadequately invested in, and then $200 million that would go across the board. Additionally, a $50 million increase in special education funding, reforms in the cyber charter space, which would essentially align cyber tuition with the actual cost of online education, but that would save school districts, so not the state, but individual school districts who make those payments, over $260 million a year. And then we had put a lot of money last year into career and technical education. We are proposing to increase that again, $2.5 million, as well as maintain funding for dual enrollment programs, recognizing that there are alternative ways for the students across the Commonwealth to enter the workforce, and we want to expose them to the many different types of career technical opportunities that are out there, as well as help them get the training to achieve those goals. Anyone who's in the Philadelphia area in particular will know about issues around school facilities. Kids need a safe and healthy place to learn. So we're proposing a $300 million investment in school facilities repairs, particularly on environmental repairs. So that's mold, lead in water, lead paint, et cetera. Additional $50 million for school safety and security. And then $3 million for feminine hygiene products to be available. Been a lot written about those who can't access, and it's called period poverty. We want to make sure that those students aren't dealing with those issues as well. I want to do a strong investment in pre-K, supporting the youngest learners, but more importantly, it's raising the wages and stabilizing the workforce. And this is not just about giving our youngest students a place to learn, but also it's to help the workforce overall. We hear a lot about parents who don't have stable care for their kids, and by hopefully increasing the seats, increasing the wages. Right now, we actually have empty seats and a waiting list. We don't have staff, and that's a Commonwealth problem. And if we believe we can stabilize the workforce, parents will have a safe place for their kids to go, kids will learn, and parents will be able to more reliably enter the workforce. and additional funding to help the Head Start Supplemental Assistance Program, which is a parallel program to the state's pre-K program. There is no question that there is a shortage of talent in education, shortage of teachers in particular. Pennsylvania used to be a net exporter of educators. Thousands would be trained here and go elsewhere. We're actually a net importer now. We don't even produce enough to sustain our own needs. So increasing funding for educator talent recruitment, increased funding for student teacher stipends. So one of the key parts of getting your education degree is doing a student teaching piece. These are students in college or graduate school who need to do student teaching and have to do it unpaid. And what we're trying to do is create stipends so that they can be paid while doing this work, which makes them better teachers to enter the workforce and allows them to do the work they need to do. And then additional funding for professional development as well. There's been a lot of, I'm sure many of you heard about higher education. We proposed a new higher education system with unified governance for the PASHE system, so the state-sponsored system, as well as community colleges. One of the things we've noticed is that there is a disconnect often between what the different pieces of higher education in the Commonwealth do serve, how they serve students. So it's not just about affordability for students, availability, but you have every school trying to be everything to everybody. And this is a national issue. A lot of higher education institutions are struggling. We wanted to make sure that our opportunities were available for students in Pennsylvania to work on affordability for students, and also make sure that students were being trained in areas that would align with the workforce needs in the Commonwealth, so that there was a smooth pipeline for students moving through. So propose $194 million for higher education for this year. Most of this is funding for the new system, 5% increase for state-related universities as well. So the Pitt, Penn State, Temple, and Lincoln. And then as the system gets a chance to develop and develop performance measures, which I'll come back to in a second, in year 2, increasing affordability for post-secondary students. So funding to help alleviate student debt would assist an estimated 87,000 students and their families. Qualifying students would only pay up to $1,000 per semester in the state systems, as well as increasing FIA state grants by $1,000, increasing that maximum annual award to nearly $7,000. The other piece of this is a performance-based going forward. So making sure that students are graduating. Most institutions of higher education do not have the best graduation rates, sometimes 50 or 60%. The worst situation is a student who goes in, spends money, gets debt, and then doesn't actually get the certification degree they need or training they need. So making sure that institutions providing the support to particularly help first-generation college students, students coming out of poverty, and making sure that those students have the supports they need to graduate all the way through, and then making at least a portion of the state subsidies performance-based for those institutions. I highly recommend, and it was back in February, the economic development team at the Commonwealth released the first economic development strategy in over 20 years. Really looking at what are the pillar pieces of the Commonwealth's economic landscape. Where are the needs? Where are the deficits? The single biggest piece is $500 million in bond funds to expand PA sites. And what that really is about creating areas where they are pad ready for businesses to come in, build, and do their work there. It's what a lot of other folks, it's where we're losing business to, that we are not site ready for businesses, and time is money for businesses. And if they're going to have to wait for things to be built out to get permits, et cetera, those delays are a big reason why we're losing out. $25 million for Main Street Matters for building up main streets across the Commonwealth. funding to support large-scale business innovation, more funding for tourism and business marketing, particularly as 2026 approaches, and much of the country and world will be focused on our region for the semi-quincentennial. I'm working on getting that one right. I believe that's correct. Funding for regional economic competitiveness challenge, which is to encourage local communities to develop their own economic strategies and help the planning, as well as funding to support internships at PA-based businesses. And again, this is part of the school to work pipeline to help build our workforce. Studies have shown the more that students actually get internships, those internships lead to jobs, they get familiar with Pennsylvania companies and are able to pursue their careers in our Commonwealth. We have made probably the most significant investment is continuing the cuts on the corporate net income tax. Over the life of the 5 years that this budget anticipates and those continued cuts, it's nearly $6 billion in business cuts over that time period. We have done a lot of good work on permit review, on speeding up the permit process. There are permits that used to take months that are now taking days. We need to build on what we have done and do that in more areas, particularly in environmental permitting. And so this is both building the IT system so we can actually track it. That which is not tracked is not managed. And we've been seeing where we can get data, we're able to manage and identify where there are issues and concerns that either we need to change our staffing approach or change the approach of the permitting. We want to expand that good work to other areas. There's significant investment in public transportation, $283 million across the Commonwealth. While the bulk of that will support SEPTA in Southeast Pennsylvania, there are, I believe, 70 different local mass transportation systems across the Commonwealth that will be supported by this, as well as programs for the elderly that on public transportation. Continue to grow agriculture. Again, a leading industry in the Commonwealth, one of the pillars of the economic development plan. So $10 million in agriculture innovation, which is supporting current businesses and attracting new businesses into the Commonwealth. Reforming the dairy margin coverage protections and a dedicated advocate. Dairy is one of our most significant industries. For those of you who have not heard and are looking for things to do this summer, you should go to the agriculture site. There is an ice cream trail tour. I believe 41 creameries across the Commonwealth. So if you're an ice cream fan in the hot weather, lots of places to go and take advantage of the fresh dairy we have here for the best ice cream you can get. In addition, a significant investment in a new state laboratory for animal health, addressing threats like HPAI and other concerns for our agriculture community. We're also calling for legalization of adult use cannabis, ideally legalizing this summer, sales effective in 2025. A portion of those proceeds being used for restorative justice initiatives. From my point of view, this is about we're losing money. Almost every neighboring state of ours has legalized cannabis, and we're losing tax revenues. For any of you who will occasionally cross the bridge, any of the bridges into New Jersey, what used to be all the signs for the shows down in Atlantic City or the shore are now get your cannabis here. Come over the bridge and find it. We're just losing significant amounts of revenue at this point and not competing in an industry that everyone else is competing in. Housing is a significant issue across the Commonwealth, across the country, actually. We are proposing to increase the FAIR program funding cap by up to $10 million. We had brought it up to 60 last year, so $10 million a year over the next 4 years to get it to 100. $15 million for the very successful home repairs program to help folks make the small repairs that help them stay in their homes. $10 million for homeless assistance, and a lot of this is about, again, keeping people in their homes. So folks who are on the edge, it's that one bill that's going to kick them out, or figuring out how to make ends meet so they don't become homeless. So it's almost a homeless prevention program. A lot of those fundings for $5 million for legal representation in eviction proceedings. And this is a very successful program in Philadelphia, which has been, is now being copied across the country, and seeing how we can copy that across the Commonwealth. And then $5 million for rapid response to emergency housing. And those are really situations where when there's a natural disaster, you often hear that, well, there'll be federal funds or other state funds, and that will help down the road with repairs and getting people back into their homes. But if people are kicked out of their homes because of fire, flooding, a lot of the other natural disaster issues we're seeing, unfortunately, increasing, those first few days when they have nowhere to stay or where they need to be put up in a hotel, they don't really have support for that. And that's what we're trying to fill that gap as we've seen that increase in different situations across the Commonwealth. Workforce, I don't know an industry that hasn't come to talk to us about struggling in the workforce, and happy to talk about that more later. But again, it's how do we connect people to the workforce? How do we make sure that people are getting the skills and training that our businesses need to move forward? So over $2 million for industry partnership investments, again, to connect the trainers to the businesses to know what they need. Skill-based hiring practice. So you may be aware that one of the first actions the governor took was to eliminate for around 95%, I don't remember the exact number, of state jobs, the college degree requirement, and really focus on hiring people for skills. People may have acquired those skills, accumulated those skills, certifications, work, whatever. And so we're trying to do more skill-based hiring. As we want to encourage that, we think it's a good thing for private sector to do, for other folks to do. It's a new way to think about hiring. So we want to help train, promote skills-based hiring, and give the tools to private sector that they might need to engage in skill-based hiring. Working on creating a one-stop shop for career pathways. Right now, you kind of have to go to multiple areas across the Commonwealth, multiple agencies, and we want to have this a simple front-facing that is focused on the person looking for the career pathway and making it easier for them. And then funding to support labor law compliance to make sure that unscrupulous competitors are being held to the law. We are investing in the childcare workforce. I talked about some of the pre-K investments. There's actually an opportunity for us to invest $96,000, which is not a lot in a $48 billion budget, but it actually allows us to leverage $62 million in federal funding that is focused on childcare issues, increasing subsidies, increase that workforce as well. The governor has called for raising the minimum wage to $15 per hour. And it to some extent, it's not just about raising to that number and what that number means and the concept of a living wage, but if we're trying to attract workers, there's an advertising element. And when we put out there that we believe the minimum wage is $7.25, we are broadcasting to everybody outside the state and our own people inside the state that this is how we value you as a worker. And this is how the Commonwealth values you. So in our ability to attract, one of those marketing pieces as well as we need to show that we value our labor force. There are a number of other public challenges. So $2 million for new outreach center for veterans, reducing medical debt. Medical debt is one of those horrible things that often hits people who are unprepared for it at a really bad time and is incidental to other issues they're dealing with as they're attempting to assist, deal with medical issues in their family. And investments in this across the country have shown that when it relieves the burden, helps with credit issues for those folks. It's a particular issue in a lot of rural areas around the Commonwealth. And that we can also, for that $4 million, can actually a multiplier of that for the debt relief we can provide for low-income Pennsylvanians. Making sure that no one is going hungry. So we want to increase the minimum SNAP benefit, which would aid over 100,000 households in the Commonwealth. Funding to help children combat hunger while not in school during the summer. So summer feeding programs. I will tell you, as a school district CFO in Philadelphia, one of the most important things we did was provide free lunches. Philadelphia qualifies for free lunch. Significant portions of our population across the Commonwealth rely on those food sources. It was actually one of the most important things we did when the pandemic hit and schools closed, was to figure out how we could feed kids and their families, and as much as continuing education, learned exactly how dependent we are on that. And during the summer, kids aren't in school. If they're not in summer programs, want to make sure that they are not going hungry during that period when they're not in the routine programs. In addition, funding for food security programs, local farmers, to help our own agriculture businesses help fund our food security programs across the Commonwealth. As I mentioned, last year we were the first, or going into last year, we took office, one of only 2 states that did not fund indigent defense. We had asked for 10 million, we got 7.5 million to help fund it across the state, and we're asking to go up to that 10 million, as well as providing expanded legal services in civil cases. We have been looking at reimbursement rates to support some of our most communities in need, resources to the individuals' disability community. Another area where workforce has fallen short, it is you can be paid more to work at Target right now than to work with the IDEA community. And looking at how our rates have not moved up, and we are proposing to increase $480 million in funding in this area. A big portion of that is enhanced reimbursement rates, which will allow salaries to increase, 12% rate increase. That leverages our $217 million in state investment, leverages $266 in federal funding towards this effort. Also, almost $35 million to community waiver programs and funding community-based programs so that we can have more home community-based services. Again, trying to keep people in their home, help them live where they are, and a whole new approach on the way the service delivery works for the IDA community, and hoping to actually deliver services to an additional 1,500 individuals who are on waiting lists in some cases for some of these services. Supporting and protecting other vulnerable communities, so aging our way, and it's possible it's today or next week, I don't remember exactly, but the Secretary of Aging is going to be releasing the new master plan for older adults right around now, but we knew some of the recommendations, so we want to have investments in the master plan, funding to increase the Penn Care program, which supports the aging centers across the Commonwealth. And again, it's about stabilizing that workforce as well. Funding to address senior housing challenges. And we want to establish an Alzheimer's disease and related disorders division. It's a significant issue, particularly in Pennsylvania. It's the second oldest state in the union. And it's enough of an issue that we want to make sure we have a full division that can be planning and providing services. Building healthy communities and make sure folks have access to healthcare, which I know particularly for the group I'm speaking with this morning. So $50 million to lower insurance premiums for an estimated 200,000 at-risk Pennsylvanians. And these are folks who, as premiums rise, they are, working poor, working low income, and may no longer be able to just, afford their insurance premiums, and making sure we can fill that gap so that folks who are working, who are otherwise okay, don't lose access to healthcare because they can't afford insurance premiums. Want to codify the Department of Health's long-term care transformation office and really think about how we provide long-term care. We did a significant investment last year in maternal health, prenatal education, and we want to increase that investment. We have infant mortality rates and maternal issues that are significantly higher than they should be, and we want to make sure we're doing the proper investments to learn, understand, and provide services in all those areas. and making sure that we're adequately inspecting our nursing homes across the Commonwealth. Gun violence continues to be a significant issue in numerous areas across the Commonwealth. So proposing to increase our funding on kind of both key sides of violence intervention and prevention program, community-driven models to reduce violence, at the same time enhancing the resources for gun violence investigation, prosecution, make sure that those who do use guns that the local authorities have the supports they need, resources they need to react, combat, and appropriately prosecute those involved in gun violence. A significant investment in the Boost program, which is actually mirroring a Pittsburgh program for after school time. It helps to reduce violence, build communities. It's again, from my experience in the school district, that time when we know where kids are, for the most part, they're safe in schools. That time after school, when there might not be anywhere for them to go, making sure there are programs in places that they can be secure and learning and growing in a positive environment. Funding for blight remediation, park construction in communities affected by gun violence. Improving the communities can help reduce the gun violence based on studies. Increase funding the Nonprofit Security Grant Fund. Unfortunately, a lot of nonprofits, particularly houses of worship, are continuing to see stresses on security, making sure they have the funding to make sure that they can be secure in their places. Creating an actual Office of Gun Violence at PCCD, which did not previously exist, and funding for a firearm prevention program. Want to make sure that we are providing proper care and opportunity for those in the justice system. So a medication-assisted treatment program, $30 million, which will help those who come into the system with addiction issues, help them treat those issues so that they are better prepared when they come out to rejoin society. Funding to Department of Corrections to increase out-of-cell time, who are in extended restrictive housing. This is aligning with best practices across the country. It does cost more to ensure that proper security and folks have that time, but believe it's in the best interests of those in that status and the system overall. And significant investment in enhancing adult probation, really aimed at reducing recidivism. That's an issue that investment up front is better for people, better for the community, and fiscally more sound. And we want to add more funding to Fire and Emergency Medical Services Grant Program, recruitment, retention, equipment needs crises, particularly a lot of our volunteer fire departments, a lot of folks that have been stressed because of the pandemic and other issues, make sure they have the funding they need to have up-to-date equipment, functioning equipment, et cetera. Funding transfer to the Crime Victims Compensation Fund is primarily because actually the fund has not been able to keep up with the needs of crime victims, and then additional funding to support victims of domestic violence. Make sure that the state police have the equipment they need to do their work, enhance maintenance, make sure they're for a long period of time, as government tends to do, did not invest. So a lot of the equipment, cars might have 150,000 miles on them, be 12 years old, and the ability to make sure there's a normal replacement cycle for PSP equipment, as well as there are increasing demands on our state troopers, as a lot of local governments are unable to keep up local police forces, so making sure there are enough cadets in the system. Access to mental health services, and this is a particular area close to the governor's heart, making sure there's mental health funding for our students and our teachers in K through 12 schools, increasing funding for community-based mental health services, making sure that our 988 crisis line is a statewide system, and that it is fully funded, expanding community-based diversion programs, and creating and maintaining walk-in mental health crisis stabilization centers across the Commonwealth. I'm not going faster because these are less important. I just realized that time is moving, so I want to keep everything going. And also supporting investments in environmental innovation. So significant funding for capping abandoned wells. We keep hitting milestones of capping abandoned wells, and there are an extraordinary number across the Commonwealth. Funding to leverage federal funding, supportive planning, environmental justice initiatives. So there's a lot of federal funding available for this. We can, our $2.5 million could potentially leverage hundreds of millions of dollars in the federal government. There's been a lot about PFAS contamination and the new PFAS standards, so make sure that we have the testing capabilities, as well as upgrading air quality monitoring capabilities. And for all of you who recall what happened with the Canadian forest fires and what that meant for air quality, and making sure we can monitor it, as well as funding to expand and improve our trail system. A lot of folks during the pandemic discovered our trail system, place to go out, and it's now heavily used. We want to make sure that it's kept up to speed and even expanded in areas. And we want to expand the outdoor core program to introduce students to working in our public lands, agriculture, and all those areas. Okay, happy to go back. I'm going to stop sharing screen, and time is yours.
Outstanding. Thank you for that. That was a very thorough explanation of the governor's initiatives, and the governor has been very aggressive in pushing those initiatives, and we're gonna get into a lot of those, or some of those anyway, shortly. But I want to give you the opportunity to tell the employees of Capital Blue Cross, and obviously a statewide PCN audience, who Ori Monson is. Tell us about yourself and how you got connected with Governor Shapiro.
So, as you mentioned, I grew up in Philadelphia, downtown Philly. My father worked at Penn, so we moved to Philadelphia when I was pretty young. So I'm a diehard Philadelphia sports fan. I'll put that out there. I wear a kippah, and I have one for each of the teams. I wear it at the appropriate times. Have that superstition as well, so that's good. I've career in public service. I actually got hooked on public service when I was 18 years old, senior, and had to do a public service project. And I worked for a woman named Marcine Madelman. It was called the Mayor's Commission on Literacy, Mayor Good. And in addition to learning how all that worked, learning about adult literacy needs, doing the training to become a literacy teacher, she felt it was important to expose me to city government. And I actually attended city council budget hearings and was just in awe, and went to a whole bunch of things. And what I learned was that two important things. One, government does really, really important things and helps a lot of people. And two, government doesn't really work very well. And I made it my mission in my career that I want to make government work better. I want to make it work more efficiently, more effectively. Happen to be good with numbers, so I ended up on the budget side, but I'm a policy person by heart. I have known the governor since he was a teenager. He was in the same class as my brother, a few years behind me, and I worked in DC when he was in DC working, and we would occasionally see Eagles games together. And when I was at PICA and he was in the state representative, he would call me up for what's going on in Philly, and I would ask him for what's going on in Harrisburg, and it was helpful. And then when he became the commissioner of Montgomery County, he sort of caught me by surprise, because he called me up and asked me to meet with his team to talk about what ideas they can consider. And about 20 minutes in, I realized it was a job interview.
Okay.
And ended up as CFO in the county, and then went to the school district, and very happy to serve with him again. He's a very good person to work for, and really excited about the things that he and our whole team can do at the Commonwealth.
So 2 years in, How you finding it? You like the gig, or is it like dog years, right? It's like 2 years is 7 years.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I some things there are some really really good people in Harrisburg uh, at all levels. The budget team in particular, the whole team and the comptroller, those are the folks that no one ever talks about. They're kind of behind the scenes, keeping the books. Um, they do a great job. It's amazing. A lot of dedicated people, a lot of good folks. I really enjoyed working with them. Learning Harrisburg ways, and um, I got training early. And when I was Department of Education, I started in policy and ended up being a congressional liaison. So I dealt with Capitol Hill and all that. Um, we're learning, and there was a lot made of last year's budget fund. Um, and in fairness to all of us, uh, negotiating a budget is about relationships. And we were all new. Governor's team was new majority in the House, new folks leading the Senate. And part of that is building relationships and, recognizing how we all can work together, should work together. And I'm hopeful and confident that we'll hit our appropriate deadlines this year. I'm sure that's the question I get asked the most. So I'll just during my budget testimony, I was asked that question, and I said, I want to be done by June 30th. My wife would very much like me to have a summer. She's made a few comments about that, but all of us do. I mean, it's hard work, and there's no reason we can't get there as long as we work together and recognize that the ultimate goal, I think, is helping the citizens across the Commonwealth. And I'll also say on this, I actually take the deadline very personally, because having been a school district CFO, having been a county CFO, when there's an impasse, I get the impact. I'm generally very calm and even keeled. According to my staff, they've seen me in 18 months get angry 2.5 times. Half is an interesting one. But the first time was when someone made a comment, well, an impasse doesn't matter. And I got, because counties can't serve the people they need without the money coming in. School districts can't plan for the school year, all those things. So it has an impact, and I know that firsthand, and I know what that struggle is like for school districts, for counties, for local government, and we can do better than that.
I taught public school for a few years, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And everything in this town, and what both you and I do, is about relationships. So, but you did answer the last question I was going to ask you: is, are we going to be done by June 30th? Because there's a few people I think on the webinar here who are trying to plan their summer vacations as well. So, but in your presentation, you gave us a lot to unpack. So we're going to segue into that. And we're a healthcare company. Capital BlueCross is a healthcare company, and you mentioned a $50 million investment in the Penny State Healthcare Exchange. And I'd like to begin there, if you don't mind. I mean, Capital has been in the exchange since it began, and we're a proud member, and we're excited about an opportunity to provide more financial assistance to certain groups of people on the exchange. I will say, though, that the other component to the state exchange is the reinsurance program, and I think the governor's proposal is for a one-time pilot program to take that $50 million from the Workers' Comp Security Fund to fund reinsurance. Now, over the last several months, as the ideas percolate through town, it seems the legislature wants a more longer-term financial commitment to the reinsurance program. That's my feel, and I'm curious: is that a longer-term commitment to the reinsurance program, something that the governor would support? And if so, what other options are there out there for that long-term financing of the reinsurance program?
So I think there are a couple answers to that, a couple pieces of that. Number one, I mean, Penny Exchange reinsurance program has been tremendous, particularly as we've gone through the redetermination process, all that efforts, what you and your folks, what folks across the Commonwealth have done in that has been literally a lifeline for people. And we shouldn't underplay that. I think this was something we want to try. It's a little new. And it's interesting that it gets picked on for not the long-term funding for me. So I have done 5-year plans everywhere I've ever been, and I'm a big believer. And it's every single thing that we put in our budget in year one is continuously funded for all 5 years, which is never done in public budgeting. We have to show a 5-year budget, but we don't show it like going away, magically it'll come back. This is the one exception. Literally, this is the only one in the entire thing. And it really was because it was a pilot, because it is new and we want to see, we have estimates of how many people will be helped by it. And we want to really get our hands around, understand what the right funding is. I think there are, if it works, and if it works the way we want it to, there are, whether it's other funds, whether it's a general fund, a year from now, we're projecting to have $11.3 billion. If it works, if it's a priority, we'll find the money to continue it. But it really is such a pilot that that's the only reason we didn't. If it doesn't work, no one does it. It costs a lot less until we know. I mean, who knows? Maybe with inflation and other issues, it's twice as many people need it. And then what does that mean for us and what's sustainable? So because it was such an unknown, that's why we did it this way. And there was that funding available in the fund.
Okay, well, that's very helpful. I mean, because you mentioned the reasons behind it are to try to control insurance costs for consumers on the exchange. We're sensitive to that ourselves. I mean, trying to manage our costs so that we can provide an affordable product is something we struggle with all the time. And I think that's a segue into a different question, but in many ways, just a larger examination of the same question is, how do you control costs in the healthcare system that are obviously putting pressure on the products that I can provide in the commercial market, but they're also putting pressure on you and what the state can provide in the Medicaid marketplace. I mean, how do we get a handle on the costs that are driving my costs and the costs in the Medicaid plan?
So it's an interesting topic, and this is one of the many issues that are on the various list of issues that are not Pennsylvania only. These are national issues, and there are some solutions that we're never going to be able to. They are going to have to be dealt with on a national level, and we're watching healthcare, whether it's Medicaid, prescription areas in particular, the impacts of the Ozempics and what that's doing. Like, I'm also a trustee of the Pennsylvania Employee Benefit Trust Fund, and I'm watching what that's starting to do. And as these new super drugs come out, and some of those single ones alone can be devastating for pharmacy plans. And we have called for PBM reform, and we're going back and forth what that actually looks like. And it's not an easy issue because it has different impacts for different folks. Large systems versus small systems. Rural, urban, things that make sense for small pharmacies will also can be harmful for really large systems that they can take advantage of that really are money saving. So it's a balancing effort. And I think one of the reasons that the governor called that we need it, but really wants to have that dialogue and has been talking, I know, to folks in the industry, the larger sizes, as well as kind of small pharmacy owners, et cetera. Legislators, folks who have been impacted by it. And I think there's an opportunity for us to do something. It's another one of those that we're still working with what we can control, because there are things that are just beyond us we can't on the national level and some ways international level. And, if we could change patent law, we could probably have a little more fun with this. But given what we have, I think what we're really hoping to do is to look at all the different proposals out there and how we balance the competing interests, both within the industry, within the consumer area, and get to something that helps allow for appropriate cost growth, is how I'll put it. Things cost more. Things will cost more, and costs will go up, and all things we want to do. It's when they're outpacing other things that it really is a problem. Mm-hmm. How do we control the outliers? So our goal really on this one is to work with, you all know this stuff better than we do. and understanding what the ancillary impacts are of what we're proposing, and hoping to get to a place that we can all together, something we agree on and move forward with.
Oh, outstanding. I mean, that's a segue into my next question. It has to do with the PBM stuff, and I applaud Governor Shapiro and the administration for taking that on. That's a complicated issue, and hey, I'm a health insurance company, or I represent a health insurance company, and I think PBMs do a great job. I know that might be a minority opinion around town at the moment, but I think there's a conversation to be had because, and you slyly mentioned it about patent reform, but the cost of the drugs and for the audience, a PBM is a pharmacy benefit manager, and it's a company that helps health insurance companies manage the pharmacy benefit for our customers. Pretty simple, and they help control those costs, and those costs are growing daily, and so the PBM reform is a balancing act between the PBM and the local pharmacy in many cases, and that pharmacy feels that they are being unfairly treated in that relationship. If it's a cost control piece versus how do you manage that? Because in the conversation right now, I understand the pharmacists are asking for a $10.49 dispensing fee in the Medicaid program. Wow. That seems like it would leave a dent, right? In the Medicaid program. I'm curious where you guys are on that. Have you thought about it? Are you considering it?
So there are a lot of things on the table and a lot of things being pushed out. So I'm gonna stay out from commenting on any single one.
Okay.
I think overall, I think the pieces are that cost control is a big piece of it. I think transparency on data is a big piece of it. And again, so it's figuring out where we can all get to the same place. Where in some places that Pennsylvania is behind some other states in terms of how the insurance industry can regulate. There are, as in any industry, and this is not a slight on any industry, but every industry has good actors and bad actors. And so, we talked earlier about what we're trying to regulate in nursing homes and making sure you get, and with our license and inspections. So you got to make sure that government has the tools to work with keep the bad actors out, and to make sure the good actors are supported. So that's also a piece of this as well. I think there are a lot of things on the table about how we do that balancing act. Again, large BMs, and I'm on PBTF now. I was a trustee on the teachers fund. I've worked with PBMs for 15 years. I kind of been in there. I get it. And everyone likes to point to different folks as being the bad guy and why I can't get to my doctor or why it takes 3 months to get an appointment. But everyone's doing their role, and the trick is to make sure that we're balancing all those interests. So I'm hopeful we'll get to something that has enough tools and pieces that will not overburden anybody, but actually help make the system better overall.
Well, can't ask for more than that. I'll just leave you with two things about that. Is Capital is one of the good guys, and more importantly, seriously, we'd like to be a partner with the administration and with the governor in trying to engage in these conversations, because it is important. It's important work, and it matters to people because they'll feel it if we do it wrong, and that's and we believe it's an important conversation to have. But I will transition. I'll get you off the healthcare hot seat, and I'll there's a couple of things I want to do, but we are running out of time. But I'll go to your home run swing, so to speak. And let's talk about education. You mentioned the lawsuit, the unconstitutional way we've been funding public education. I'm curious, is that just simply the state was not funding certain districts at the level it was supposed to? Is it that simple?
So, kind of.
Okay.
And it's what really happened is what leaving aside there's two pieces to it. There's are they funding in the right way, and is there sufficient funding? So let's leave aside the sufficiency piece for the moment. Um, are you is there equity in the way it's divided? And I'll try and do as briefly as I can. In the 90s, they froze the basic education formula, and the money continued to go that way. So even if you lost students, you continue to get the same amount. So a district that had 40,000 students that went to 24,000 still got the same amount of funding, and that helped lead to inequities. The system also did not take into account poverty, other surrounding issues, and the ability of local districts to pay their own, what their local tax burden was. The Governor Wolf created the fair funding formula, but the fair funding formula only applied to new money that was appropriated. So if $7 billion had been there before, they added 200 million. The 7 billion went under the old formula. The 200 million went under the new formula. So you can kind of see how that's going to take about 50 years to undo. The court said, no, that's not meeting the state constitutional requirements. What we're proposing to do is to put more money, the biggest investment, through an adequacy, which really hits there are 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, which is a whole other story. But the 400 who have been underfunded, based on all those factors, will get a greater percentage. We'll actually get the bulk of the money and divide it with all those factors in, with some money going into the old system so that everyone gets something to keep up with cost of inflation, et cetera. And to try and meet, it will not do it in 1 year. It will take time, but it also took 30 years to get where we are. I'm not saying it's going to take 30 years to get out of it, but we need to be making more substantial progress towards it. Since I knew the stats from Philadelphia, to give you a sense of scale, if all the old money went through the new formula, not even the formula we're proposing, but the fair funding formula, Philadelphia would have gotten $400 million more a year.
Okay.
Just because of the old system. So trying to make up for that, you, again, can't do it in 1 year, but this starts to chip away at that. And it's a significant investment, which actually does a big piece of that in year one.
So we are running out of time, and I do want to give you the last word, but I do have a follow-up question on that. I mean, over the last 8 to 10 years, we made significant investments in public education in the state. The Wolf administration made a very strong commitment along those lines, as has Governor Shapiro in the first 2 years. How do we define success? What does that look like? And is in terms of, is that investment paying off? How do we measure that?
So the biggest problem with answering that question is we had that little pesky pandemic in the middle.
Right.
I can tell you from being there, and I'm completely honest. I mean, 2019, so I'd been at the school district for 3 years. What Dr. Haidt was doing there, you were seeing test scores go up, you were seeing progress, we were redoing buildings, the world stopped. I mean, we had to pivot, change communication, and that school group is behind. And my youngest is finishing his junior year in high school. His middle school years were a disaster. Okay. And we all think about middle school, which was terrible because of all the social stuff we were going through. Right. They didn't get that. So that whole group, the group that's going to be graduating this year, next year, there's going to be a lot of makeup for them, mental health side of education side. So it's a little unfair to sort of look back the last 5-6 years and not account for that. I do think going forward, one of the things you want to do is making sure, how's the money being spent? You should be seeing everything from test scores going up, graduation rates going up. Ideally, you should be reducing your truancy rates. And one of the things I'd like to see, for example, is we should be seeing fewer special ed settlements. Kids are getting the supports they need up front rather than the more expensive because the districts couldn't do it. But we just have to recognize the fact that Philadelphia now, I think, is the district that has large districts has the best recovery in terms of jumping back in scores. Now they were low, so there's that, and I'll admit that. But the work that's going to be in front of our educators for the next 5-10 years is massive, and the impacts on all of us and our future are dependent on those investments and making sure we can get there.
Thank you for that. And I will give you the last word. Do that for all the guests on this program. So you have the last word.
So I was thinking about this, and I've talked about this a few times, and now that we seem to have settled the issue of whether or not there's money available, and I'll just leave it at that. I'll play nice. We have needs across the Commonwealth, whether it's our workforce needs, whether it's education, whether it's our people who are, our aging community, helping to keep them in home, and things actually will be better for us. We didn't get to talk in a lot of detail about the economic development plan and the sites plan, but we know we lost businesses. They didn't complain about our tax rates. They did not about our workforce. The thing they said about was we didn't have pad-ready sites. And our permit process needs work, which we're working on. So we want to make this a community where our folks can thrive. And that's going to take investment, and we want to put this money to work. I've quoted a Jewish scholar, Talmud, of if not now, when? And this is the when. It's rare in government. I've never had money. Normally I'm trying on the other side, trying to scrape it together, look on the couch cushions. We have resources, combination of good tax collections, combination of the federal investment, and we want to, governor has really important things that will help everybody and kind of raise everything, raise it all boats. And that's what we want to do.
Well, that's the last word. And we will have you back to talk about PA competitiveness, because I've got a ton of questions on that. But I want to thank Budget Secretary Ori Monson for appearing on the Public Affairs Forum today. Thank you for that. And please stay tuned to the next episode. On June 14th, we'll have House Democratic Appropriations Chair Jordan Harris as our guest on the Public Affairs Forum. So take care and have a good day.
The Capital Blue Cross Forum is sponsored in part by Capital Blue Cross.